and we're going to start with the NFL as we bring in our five-time Grey Cup champion, XFL champion, and CFL and TSN panelist. Jim, as you know, Bailey Zappi threw 3 first-half touchdown passes. The New England Patriots snapped a 5-game skid, and they hurt the playoff hopes of the Steelers a bit, 21-18 last night. The Steelers beaten in their own building by two-win teams in back-to-back weeks, the Patriots and the Cardinals. What was your take on that game, first of all, coming out of it, and then we'll examine the aftermath?
Well, to quote Jim Mora, playoffs? Are you kidding me? Playoffs? You're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, they've lost Kenny Pickett. Trubisky's Trubisky. And you know, they fire their offensive coordinator, which I'm never a fan of midseason. And they did that, and they played one game. They were decent, and then they've played 2 just bad games offensively. And again, the Patriots are a dreadful team right now. They've lost their best defensive player, their pass rusher, Judon. I don't know. I was surprised the game was as entertaining as it was. And I thought that Bailey Zappi threw a couple of really nice footballs, very accurate, and gave them a chance, much more so than Mac Jones has done over the last few weeks anyway. So again, I think the Steelers they're done. I think it's something you can, with Pickett or without Pickett. You know, they're not in the same class with the teams they're competing with to get into the playoffs. You know, you have the Chargers that, again, haven't played well, but just a little better, the Texans, and you know, just teams like that I think are just better than the Steelers are.
Well, I love the analysis that feeds me into my next question. We talked about this yesterday. I'm getting all frothed up. Thursday night football, Steelers, Patriots. And then they take the field, and I'm like, ew. You just named it. Bailey Zappi, Mitch Trubisky. It's not Brady and Roethlisberger. So my question is, Tomlin, Belichick, how long a leash do these guys get? When does the great career reach the tipping point and you can survive a bad season versus it's not coming back, it's over? Where's that tipping point?
I think in both cases, I think you're going to see a long leash. And again, Pittsburgh's one of those teams, they don't change coaches. Tomlin's been there forever. He's been through some ups and downs, but for the most part had Roethlisberger. Belichick, he is obviously what he is in New England, the greatest football coach, one of them of all time, without question. And again, you remember he started with the Cleveland Browns and was dreadful, and then he went to the Jets for a day or whatever. And again, get Tom Brady. Tom Brady ends up being a phenomenal quarterback. I think they'll give these guys at least another year. It just that they're great football coaches, and the fact they don't have a quarterback and they're going through transition, I just think their ownership is too smart to go and make changes and make moves and think that that's going to make it better. Bailey Zappi is going to be Bailey Zappi. Now, they're both going to have good draft picks next year. You know, New England will have a chance to draft a good quarterback. There's 4 or 5 of them in next year's draft that all have a chance. Which one's going to be the great one? You know, they're talking about Caleb Williams, but, you know, you watch what's happening to Bryce Young, and that scares you a little bit because Caleb's a lot like him. They're both run-around guys with very accurate arms, strong arms. You know, but what is he going to be? Is he going to get the right people around him and that type of thing? So, again, I think you're going to see it's about ownership groups. When we talked about this last week, Rod, it's about winning teams. It's about ownership groups. And for years, the Arizona Cardinals have been terrible, and they're back to being terrible, and their ownership hasn't changed. You know, the Bidwell family has owned it for years. And again, they do things differently. And it's a lot of the things you don't see as a fan that makes an ownership great or not great. And I think that when you look around the league, when you got to play a guy like Bob Kraft, who has won a lot of games in New England, who knows what he has there, he's going to have a very long leash for his coach, as is the Rooney family with Tomlin.
So Ryan McCarthy's checked in from Saratoga, New York. He's watching. He says, "Good day, Rod Squad. I tuned in just in time to hear Coach Barker cook." Yes, you did, Ryan, and we're about to talk about your favorite team, the Jets. Last I checked, they haven't named a starting quarterback, New York, for Sunday's game against the Texans. And, I mean, there's so much buzz. They're
They
saying
just
the
signed
team's so bad, Aaron Rodgers.
Didn't
They did just sign somebody, but can they play him? Yeah, they signed Brett Rippon off the Seahawks practice roster, but I can't think they'd get to start him. Yeah. My question to you is, the criticism in New York I'm hearing is, Aaron Rodgers snapped his Achilles 4 plays in. You didn't have a plan B. Is that a valid criticism of the Jets, that if Rodgers goes down?
Oh, I don't think at all.
How many teams do? Yeah.
I don't think at all that's the case. I think Joe Douglas, the general manager, made a conscious decision that Zach Wilson was going to be their future, and they drafted him 2nd overall. Now you get a chance to bring Aaron Rodgers in and develop him. And, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't get hurt, Zach Wilson is now developing, not having his confidence shot like is happening now. It's interesting because Hamilton's going to be in a similar situation. If they re-sign Bo Levi, it gives them a veteran quarterback for their young guy, Taylor Powell. And what does that mean for Schultz? Does that mean that he's basically just a rep eater? So, again, I look at it as with the Jets, I think their plan going in was very sound. I think Joe Douglas made a poor decision in Zach Wilson, and that he's not the right guy to be the quarterback of the New York Jets at any time. And he's proven that over the last couple of years. But I think their plan going in was right. Again, then they go out and they sign the wrong Canadian quarterback. Now, maybe they couldn't have got Nathan Rourke this week because of the Trevor Lawrence injury. But I said a couple weeks ago on here, how can you just let that kid sit on the practice roster and play Boyle and play some of these other, these guys are Brett and Rippon now. So, again, I think the Jets are a mess. Their quarterback situation's a mess. You always talk about, is it coaching or is it personnel? And there's a definite division. And in this situation, I would say right now, it's personnel because the quarterback situation and what's happened. That ultimately got me fired. Was, we had Ricky Ray, and our plan was Ricky Ray with Logan Kilgore behind him or Dan Lefevre. They both get hurt, and we go out and get Drew Willie, and that turned out to be and ultimately, Ricky Ray stayed. They won the Grey Cup the next year, but it's one of those things. You get saddled with quarterbacks that just aren't very good. You have a bad team, and, ownership is going to make changes, and they did. So, I've been there before, but I think that's what you look at with the Jets. Is this a coaching situation, or is this a personnel situation? I think it's definitely at this point a personnel situation because their defense has played very well, and they've got some young receivers that have looked good, and they signed the running back. They've got a lot of things in their offense. I think they need to address their offensive line, but I think the Jets are one of those. What they don't want to do is just start over. I mean, they got to get the quarterback situation fixed. Is Joe Douglas the right guy to be the GM for that? I don't know. I mean, I sat next to him at East West last year, and but I don't know that he's the right guy. It's just hard to tell.
It's funny, by the way, and we'll probably segue here. I don't know how your morning is. Can you stay for one more segment after this one? Give you a little more time. Are you okay with that?
Good.
Okay, go to about 10 till the hour. I appreciate that. I had a football guy call me from Mississippi the other day, beside himself that Nathan Rourke doesn't get a shot in the NFL, more than what he's had. And I'm like, man, it wasn't Tillman, it was somebody else. And I'm like, if you be up all night wondering why some people get a chance, coaches and players, and others don't. There's no explanation to that, Jim. You know that as well as we're all Rourke guys. Why he isn't yet, I don't know we'll ever have the answer for that.
No, and so much of it is players falling into the right situation for them. There's a lot of good players that never make it because they never get in a right situation. They never get in with that coach that is able to get them and be able to get the most out of them. So, again, Nathan Rourke's going to get his chance, I think. I think C.J. Beathard's hurt this week. His shoulder's hurt. Trevor Lawrence, obviously, that ankle, he's going to be out a while. So he's going to get an opportunity. And people are going to know because these are big games for them. They're, 8-4 now, I think, or 8-4. Did they win last week? When Lawrence got hurt,
They lost. They got upset.
Recall.
They got upset by the Bengals. Yeah.
That's right. 8. So they're 8-4. So these games are all going to be big for them. If Nathan Rourke goes in and takes them to wins, he's going to be on his way. People are not going to be afraid because now he's established himself as a guy. It's all about getting the opportunity and being in an offense that allows you to be successful. And I think this offense does based on what he did in the preseason. 5 drives for touchdowns in the preseason. I mean, he's a good player. We know that up here in Canada because we watched it. We watched the things he did week in and week out, and his accuracy and his leadership and his ability to move in the pocket. And he's just got a lot of those things that he couldn't show in the offense he was in at Ohio. I mean, Ohio runs a very different kind of offense. And Curtis Rourke, we saw he went into the portal this week, so he's going to be playing somewhere else next year, and for his senior year, and try to move himself up in the NFL draft.
Note to our viewers, next segment we'll answer all of your CFL questions. We have questions coming in about CFL, college, and NFL right now, Jim. In the 2 minutes right here, I just want to ask you, what did you think about Curtis Rourke entering the transfer portal, by the way? And as we sit here today, I don't think he's made a decision where he's going.
I thought it was a really bright decision by him. I mean, it gives him an opportunity. One, he'll make money. He'll be one of the highest paid guys out of there. And those guys now are going, it's close, 7 figures. It's close for these to go to the good places. And he's going to have a great opportunity to make some money, but also get into a situation where he can go do spring ball and get himself acclimated, just be a better fit for him than what he has right now at Ohio. I think that's one of the good things about the NIL is player like Curtis Rourke. Again, college football, they're a little on my downer now after the Florida State thing. I just think that's wrong. I don't think the best teams always win. You can put it down on paper and say these guys have the best line and the best this and the best that. But Florida State won every game, and they won 4 of them without Jordan Travis. And I just thought it was wrong. And you can say what you want about Alabama, Texas, and whatever, but I guarantee you, Washington goes into the last game of the season as 10-point underdogs to Oregon. If Washington was going against Alabama or they're going against Texas, my bet is Texas probably going to be favored. So you can't look at the games, and I don't know what they're using is when they pick Texas over Florida State. Are they saying, well, in a game right now, Texas would win. In a game right now, Alabama would win. Well, we saw in the Grey Cup, in a game right now, Winnipeg was going to win, and they didn't, because it's not always the 45 best players that win, but it's the best 45 together as a team. And we don't know what magic is going on at Florida State.
Well, we have FSU broadcaster Eric Llewellyn coming up next hour. I'm hoping to find out. But when they go to a 12-team playoff, there's still going to be people ticked off next year. But you're right. This is the most egregious of the 10 years that they've been doing this particular semifinal setup. Jim Barker's with us, CFL on TSN panelist, and I'll turn it over to the viewers now. Got some Hamilton fans, Lions fans writing in, Rider fans. But first of all, Scott Westman writes in, Jim, and he says, is Jim confirmed to be on the TSN panel next year? Have they picked up the option, Jim?
Well, I don't know that there's any option. We usually find out around, March or April, and I'm guessing I am. I mean, I believe that's the plan, but you just never know, in this, how this works, and all I can do is the best I do, and what's going to happen is going to happen.
Well, you did a very, very, very good job this year. I really appreciated your efforts on there, and obviously on here too, but it's fun talking football. Camper in Hamilton, that's the name, Camper writes, and he says, I see a restructured Bo Levi deal, keeping Taylor Powell to develop for the next year. What do you know or think will happen in Hamilton this year with a quarterback position and a new head coach in Scott Milanovich?
Well, I know nothing in terms of what their plans are. I don't think they know yet. They just named Scott 2 or 3 days ago. Um, Personally, as I look at that situation, I'm a believer. We talked a little about the quarterback situation with the Jets and having the veteran guy and then the young guy. And I'm a believer in that. When we got Ricky Ray, we used Jarius Jackson that first year, but then our plan was we had Zach Caleros and Trevor Harris. They came in and vied to be 2 and 3. And as they progress, if 3 is better than 2, then you bring another guy in the next year to compete with 2, and that kind of thing. They kind of have that in Hamilton if Bo Levi can grasp what they're doing. I mean, he's a guy who's been a proven veteran guy that can win games. Now, is he proven in Scott Milanovich's system? No, but he didn't really have an opportunity. The one game that he played when he came back, Scott was gone. If you remember, he was gone a week, and Mike Gibson called the plays. And so he's been around Scott, but hasn't actually played for him. And he got injured again in that game. So, whether or not he can fit for them, if he can fit for them, the way I would look at this, I see Matthew Schultz as a great backup quarterback, and that's what he is. But I would, because of my philosophy of how to do it, I would get Taylor Powell and have him be the second. He's shown enough that he could be a backup guy. He's won games for him. He got him into the playoffs. And then bring in the best guy that they can find to compete as a number 3. Let him compete all year with Taylor, try to get him to number 2. And by the end of the year, you make a decision. Is Bo going to be back? If he's not, is Taylor ready? Now you have a guy you've groomed. Those guys, Cody Fajardo, Trevor Harris, Zach Caleros, they carried clipboards for 3 years. People forget that. But they didn't play. And they played sparingly. So I think that's important for a young quarterback in order to gain his confidence. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Dustin Crum in Ottawa, because he got so much playing time. You don't know if that kind of did what's happened to Zach Wilson with the Jets, because he didn't win a lot of games. And, you don't want to say losing becomes part of it, but it does. And just like winning does. And when he won those first few games, you thought, wow, we could have a real special player here. So, I think there's some really interesting quarterback situations, but I think Hamilton has one that, again, it's not me, but I think that's the approach I would take. And not that Matthew Schultz isn't good enough to be the backup, but again, he's a very good backup. I don't think he's the guy you want to go into the season and say, this guy's my starter.
Interesting, of all those guys you mentioned, it was Schultz that started the playoff game, and Bo doesn't come in until the game's out of hand. That's the one thing I don't understand. Kirk,
but that's part
in
of
Toronto.
Rod. Yeah. That's part of my point. Is he's had a chance now to start a playoff game, and he goes in there and plays real well and lights it up. Now, it's not his fault that Keandre Smith fumbles on the 20. It's they had a good first drive, but he didn't get the win. He didn't get it done and ended up getting pulled from that game. That, to me, is kind of my point with him is he's gotten a shot. A lot of these young guys don't get a shot to be in the playoffs. He got the shot, got the start, and didn't deliver. So
that feeds real well into this next question from Kirk in Toronto, who's watching on Game Plus TV, and he says, should the Argonauts go after Bombers free agent quarterback Drew Brown just in case Chad Kelly was a one-year wonder? What do you think?
I think not a chance. Not a chance. Again, Chad Kelly had a bad playoff game. Okay? Is next year's playoff game going to be huge for him if they make it to the playoffs, which I'm anticipating they would? Absolutely. He's now got to get over that. His uncle never won a Super Bowl game. Does that mean he was a bad quarterback? Here's my deal on Drew Brown. There's a lot more guys like Arbuckle and Franklin and guys who were great backups, and everybody said this guy's going to be the next great guy, that haven't panned into the next great guy. I don't think you take a guy like Chad Kelly, who's won 15 games as a starter, or 14 games as a starter, and lost none during a regular season, and take a guy who has been a backup And the one game he started, he lost. He came back and lost that game. So again, I don't think you go out and say that guy's going to be my guy. He'll probably get overpaid a bit because somebody will have to take a chance and hope that he's more Zach Collaros than he is Nick Arbuckle. But that's the problem with guys who have just been backups. Dane Evans goes from being a backup to getting the starting job, and that it's a different world. When you look around and that whole organization is on your shoulders, that's a completely different deal than being a backup and doing what Drew Brown has done in his career. So in my mind, I would never pay him a bunch of money to be a starting quarterback at this point. I just wouldn't do it. That's me.
Thank you. I appreciate, well, that's why we have you here. Jim Barker's appearances are brought to you by EMJ Marketing, and you can reach them at emjmarketing.com. Ask for Joe there. They'll provide the perfect keynote speaker for your event. We'll be back with a sports update. Jim, thanks for this so much. Love chatting with you. We'll talk with you in a week.
All right, Rod.
All right, we'll be right back. You're watching the RP Show on Game Plus TV, WQEE Radio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube Live.